Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Jakarta and good morning to other colleagues. My name is Nella, Communication Officer at the ASEAN Center for Energy, and I will be the MC for the workshop today and tomorrow. We are delighted to welcome all of you to the first day of the workshop towards sustainable and energy efficient buildings and coolings in Southeast Asia. The workshop will be divided into two sessions, and today's session is Advancing Energy Efficient Cooling in Southeast Asia. This session will identify key implementation strategies and best practice examples to guide ASEAN towards net zero carbon goals. This workshop is organized by International Energy Agency, ASEAN Center for Energy, and the ASEAN Secretariat, with funding support from ASEAN Australia Development Cooperation Program Phase 2. Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we will listen to the first opening speech delivered by Dr. Praset Sinsuk Praset, Director General from the Ministry of Energy, Thailand.
Thank you. Ms. Caroline Scott, the Deputy Head of Mission from the Australian Mission to ASEAN, Dr. Brian Markaway, the Head of Energy Efficiency from IEA, Dr. Nuki, the Executive Director of ASEAN Center for Energy, distinguished guests, all the webinar participants. Good afternoon to everyone from IEA, and good afternoon to all the ASEAN member states. The ENC Assistant Coordinator, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you here to this webinar towards the sustainable and energy efficient buildings and cooling in Southeast Asia. First of all, I would like to thank the International Energy Agency, IEA, the ASEAN Secretariat, the ASEAN Center for Energy for organizing this virtual meeting event, and especially thanks to the Australian government for funding to strengthen partnership between Australia and ASEAN under the AADCP Phase 2. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the IEA and ASEAN has been working together since 2011 in the energy-related area, since we have the MOU signed in 2011. Over the 10 years partnership, the ASEAN and IEA collaboration has contributed on the sustainable development and energy security in many aspects, especially in energy efficiency and conservation. In January 2021, the IEA and ASEAN members had just commenced the project on roadmaps towards sustainable and energy efficient buildings and cooling in ASEAN, which aims to develop two roadmaps, consist of ASEAN energy efficient buildings and construction roadmap, and the ASEAN sustainable cooling roadmap, as well as this project will build in capacity for policymakers, standard bodies, and stakeholders in ASEAN regions to adopt and apply through the project's workshop and webinars. In the end, the roadmap will be publishing in January 2022. From this project, I believe that it could help accelerate the decarbonization in the ASEAN region. Many ASEAN members, including Thailand, have set the goal to achieve the carbon neutrality and net zero emission regarding to the COP26 summit. Today we are here together for discussion on policies, including regulations, information, incentives, and digitalization, as well as the potential behavioral change interventions to boost the energy efficiency toward a net zero energy scenario. At this open seminar, we expect the broader audience to showcase our efforts on energy efficiency enhancement at national and regional level, and hope that Finally, it will serve our aspiration energy efficiency target of reducing energy intensity by 32% by 2025 under the Upper Phase 2. Finally, pleasure to be with you all today and wish you a very fruitful and successful meeting. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. Now I would like to invite Ms. Caroline Scott. She is the Deputy Head of Mission of the Australian Mission to ASEAN to deliver the second opening remarks. Hello, Ms. Carolina, can you hear me?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sinsuk Prasad, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be with you here this afternoon. Australia recognises the importance of energy efficiency in achieving our goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Buildings are the source of around a fifth of Australia's carbon emission, and it's been estimated that the sector could reduce emissions by nearly 3/4 by 2030 by increasing the share of renewable energy in the grid to above 70% and increasing electrification and energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is critical to reducing emissions, reducing energy wastage, improving resilience to extreme weather and blackouts, improving the comfort, health and productivity of occupants, and lowering energy costs for households and businesses. Households and businesses often have higher than necessary energy costs because markets don't incentivise cost-effective energy efficiency improvements to existing buildings, where higher operating costs are borne by occupants, especially when building to lease. In 2018, the Australian governments agreed a national plan that aims to achieve net zero ready commercial and residential buildings in Australia. The trajectory for low energy buildings, The trajectory is a key initiative to address Australia's energy productivity improvement target. It identifies cost-effective opportunities for energy efficiency improvements throughout the building system for both new and existing buildings. For example, modelling indicated that changes in energy efficient requirements in Australia's National Construction Code for new buildings could deliver savings to occupants of homes in tropical climates of over $650 a year, while changes to commercial buildings could deliver a net benefit of $25 billion by 2050. It was also estimated that delaying cost-effective changes to the building code by just 3 years could lock in 9 million tonnes of emissions up to 2030 and 22 million tonnes of emission to 2050, and cost over $2 billion in household energy bills by 2030. To meet the targets set out in the trajectory, Australia has developed revised National Construction Code provisions for new energy efficient residential buildings, and these were released for consultation in October this year. Australia's experience shows that challenges to improving sustainability and energy efficiency can only be achieved through ongoing processes that take into account new technologies like smart meters and thermostats. It also requires a coordinated approach across various levels of government and close consultations with stakeholders, including industry, consumer, and academic bodies. The event today can make an important contribution to ASEAN's sustainability and energy efficiency agenda, not only by learning from international experts, but by sharing lessons and experience across ASEAN member states. I encourage everyone participating over the next 2 days to use this forum to engage with the opportunities and challenges in improving energy efficiency in ASEAN. My thanks go to the ASEAN Centre for Energy under the leadership of Executive Director Dr. Agia Utama and Assistant Director Marigal Disagon and her team in ASEC's Energy and Minerals Division for their leadership of this important agenda. And to the team from IEA and all the presenters at the workshop for sharing their technical expertise and experience. I wish you all a successful and beneficial forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Brian Motherway to deliver the short speech on the role of energy efficiency in the race towards net zero. Dr. Brian Motherway is the head of the Energy Efficiency Division at the International Energy Agency.
Thank you very much, Chair, Ms. Nella Nabila. Thank you, Dr. Sinkus Prasad, Ms. Caroline Scott, and thank you also, Dr. Agia Utama. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and greetings from Paris. We're very pleased to be collaborating with you all on this event over the next 2 days. The IEA is very pleased to be working in the ASEAN region with all of our key partners, and we're very grateful for the support of our partners and for the Australian government in particular. It's a pleasure to be with you to give you some of the latest updates on the global context for energy efficiency trends, which I hope will be of interest to the participants as they enter into their discussions for the next 2 days. So if I could see my slides, please. So just last week, the IEA launched its annual global tracker on energy efficiency 2021. And it looks in detail at recent trends in energy efficiency markets, and particularly in the context of the growing number of targets for net zero by 2050 or soon after, and how energy efficiency can help deliver those targets, and in fact is central to delivering those targets. This year's report also takes a particular look at the role of digitalisation in energy efficiency, which I know is something that will be discussed during this event. As you will see in my presentation, we are making some progress on energy efficiency, but we need to make faster progress if we are to deliver on our energy, economic and climate targets around the world. The report is freely available to all at our website, www.iea.org. Next slide, please. So we track energy efficiency in particular through energy intensity, which is a measure of how much energy the global economy needs to be powered. In recent years, we have been improving steadily our energy efficiency, which means we have become more energy efficient each year. 2020 was a challenging year for many understandable reasons, but in 2021, we see some recovery. However, the rate of progress is still only half what it needs to be in this decade if we are to get on back on track for our climate targets. Next slide, please. We also track investment in energy efficiency, and we see some upturn in 2021 despite the difficult economic circumstances. This is obviously good news to see increasing investment in energy efficiency, particularly in the transport sector and in the building sector. However, it is driven by a small number of policies in specific countries, which indicates there's still considerable scope for additional investment in energy efficiency. And in fact, we do need to see it triple by the end of this decade if we are to get on back on track for our net zero targets. Next slide, please. We in the IEA measure very closely the progress we are making on energy efficiency, and particularly the impact of policies that have been put in place. It is encouraging to see that strong energy efficiency policies really do work. We see the countries that have had the longest and strongest policies, in this case in appliance efficiency, really do deliver very significant gains. Appliance efficiency standards and labels and other policies can, over decades, in fact, reduce the typical energy use of such appliances by half. So in many parts of the world now, consumers are buying cheaper devices. The appliances are cheaper to purchase, but they're also twice as cheap to run. So consumers are getting a very significant benefit. Electricity demand is not growing as fast as it otherwise would, and emissions are much lower than they otherwise would. It is a reminder that when policies are put in place and when they are well designed and well implemented, the benefits can be very significant. Next slide, please. In this context, seeing that energy policy does work, we track the use of such policies. We see that in recent years, more and more countries around the world are using policies such as mandatory standards or labels for key appliances such as cooling, refrigeration, lighting, motors, and transport. However, in many cases, the majority of energy used by these appliances is still not covered by standards. One key domain, of course, is space cooling. We see very fast growth in the demand for air conditioners in particular, which is fully understandable as people try to bring more comfort to their lives as it becomes more affordable to them. In many parts of the world, nearly 100% of households own air conditioners, whereas in many other parts of the world, including some of the hottest parts of the world, ownership is less than 10%. Therefore, we expect ownership of air conditioners to continue to grow very rapidly in the coming years. And that is why it is so important that strong policies are put in place to make sure that those air conditioners are as efficient as possible in ways that benefit consumers, benefit manufacturers, and of course benefit society and the environment. Next slide, please. Our analysis in the Energy Efficiency Market Report puts a particular focus on the pathway to net zero. The IEA has published a full and detailed roadmap to net zero energy systems by 2050. There is more than one pathway to net zero, but this one illustrates the many decision points and many milestones on this path, including over 40 major milestones relating to energy efficiency in buildings, transport, industry, and electricity. We see that early action is very, very important on energy efficiency, as it not only brings immediate benefits in terms of lower costs and lower emissions, but it also makes all other investments lower by reducing the size of the energy system, reducing the need for investment in supply, infrastructure, and other aspects of the energy system. That is why we see it as very important that early action on energy efficiency be an integral part of all clean energy and decarbonisation plans. Next slide, please. Before I close, I want to mention two cross-cutting elements of clean energy transitions and net zero targets. The first of this is digitalisation. We see digital devices penetrating very quickly. In fact, this year, for the first time ever, there will be more connected devices on the planet than there are people. We're seeing very sharp growth in the use of connected devices, ranging from smart meters to sensors to Internet of Things devices, building energy management systems, home energy management devices. All of these are penetrating our lives very quickly and have many energy implications. In my view, the positive implications outweigh the negative implications. Yes, these devices and supporting them uses some energy, but in many ways they can save vastly more energy than they consume, particularly when they're part of energy systems of the future that are much more dynamically integrated, matching supply and demand, bringing much more flexibility and control on the demand side to make better use of our clean energy resources, such as solar and wind when they're available, and adding to the comfort and convenience of people in their homes, offices, and in their transport. However, this requires policy. So there's an urgent need for governments to consider the policies to put in place to protect against the risks of digitalization relating to cybersecurity, data protection, and other matters, but also make sure their citizens and consumers benefit from the potential opportunities related to digitalization in terms of lower energy use, lower costs, and better system optimization overall. Next slide, please. The other cross-cutting dimension of clean energy transitions is, of course, people. We sometimes talk about technology and policy, but we also need to remember that clean energy transitions are, at the end of the day, for people and about people. And we must make sure that all clean energy transitions benefit the maximum number of people and are fully inclusive and equitable. That is why earlier this year, the Executive Director of the IEA convened the Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, which brings together ministers and thought leaders from around the world, from every part of the world, from every perspective. Just a few weeks ago, the Commission made its 12 key recommendations across 4 themes of employment, social and economic development, equity, and public participation. These recommendations are available on the IEA website, along with a large data bank of case studies supporting best practice in making clean energy policies people-centered and inclusive. And these recommendations were discussed at a number of ministerial level events just recently at COP26, as countries continue to focus on how to strengthen their clean energy policies, but in ways that are people-centered and inclusive. Next slide, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, hosts, Madam Chair, it's been a great pleasure to be with you today. We really appreciate the collaboration we're having with all of our partners in the region, and we hope that it continues to strengthen over the coming years. I wish everyone well for today and tomorrow's event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brian. Next is the keynote address on the importance of buildings efficiency for Southeast Asia, delivered by the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Energy. Please welcome Dr. Nuki Agia Utama.
Yes, thank you very much, Nela. I assume that you can see my picture. Good morning, colleagues from IEA. Good morning, colleagues from Southeast Asia. Honorables Dr. Prasad Sinsuk Prasad, the Director General Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency, Ministry of Energy Thailand. Ms. Caroline Scott, the Deputy Head of Mission of the Australian Mission to ASEAN. Also Dr. Brian distinguished delegates and colleagues from the ENC, ASEAN focal points, colleagues from ASEAN Secretariat, and also colleagues from IEA and ACE. First of all, on behalf of the ASEAN Center for Energy, it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to the first workshop of our roadmaps towards sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling in Southeast Asia project. I also would like to thank all participants for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this workshop. This is the final workshop as part of the ACE and IEA's collaboration in developing a regional roadmap documents on efficient coolings and buildings. In the build-up of each individual country's efforts to mitigate climate change, it is hoped these roadmaps will serve as reference point of the best practices and source of inspiration for possible policy and action plan in each member state. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, the 39 ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting, or AMEM, hosted virtually by Brunei Darussalam last September 2021, acknowledged that 21.8% energy intensity reduction achieved by ASEAN in 2019 based on 2005 levels, and encouraged all relevant energy bodies to exert optimum efforts to achieve the APEC Phase 2 target of 32% by 2025. Also, the meeting affirmed that adopting and expanding energy efficiency measures, particularly appliances and buildings, will help reduce energy use and emission in cost-effective way, while increasing energy security and overall economic productivity. And under the APEC 2016-2025 Phase 2, a list of targets and activities was placed to enhance the region's energy security, resilience, and sustainability. The targets and activities were set forth through the 7 APEC-specific program areas, including the energy efficiency and conservation, which is widely regarded as the most cost-effective ways to address the energy challenge and to support the transition to a low-carbon economy, promote investment and growth, and also improve employment. To achieve the target, Southeast Asia has the strategies to strengthen the sustainability of energy efficiency in building. These strategies show that efficient building is a critical matter in ASEAN, which is to accelerate the energy transition and strengthen energy resiliency, and also to strategize aim to strengthen cooperation through institutional capacity building and increasing private sector involvement, including enhancing public awareness and expanding markets for an energy efficient building to contribute to energy intensity reduction 32% based on the 2005 level. While we are also pleased to have met our EI reduction target under the previous APEC 2016-2020, which achieved 21% in 2018, exceeding the 20% target of energy intensity set under the plan. To reach ASEAN's currently proposed 32% energy intensity reduction by 2025, will require ASEAN to intensify the partnership and collaboration, which to expedite the whole process, particularly on harmonizing energy efficiency policy and planning, so that more can be done for achieving the ambitious energy intensity reduction in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 6 ASEAN Energy Outlook, or AO6 baseline scenario, ASEAN total final energy consumption is expected to double from 2017 to 2040, and building energy consumption will grow by 2/3 by 2030, around 120%. If EENC efforts are not made, commercial building will have the most notable demand growth, with a CAGR of 4.8%. Similarly, in the residential sector, electricity is projected to grow steadily until it occupies the largest share of energy demand in ASEAN due to the increased electrification ratio, the number of electrical appliances used, and the number of households. And however, energy efficiency measures could help to mitigate this growth by at least 20%. We fully recognizing the potential. Implementation of EE measures in the building sector is critical. And according to the ASEAN EE Best Practices Report, opportunities exist for significant energy saving measures and emission reduction in the building system by adopting new and refurbishing chiller system. And other measures such as replacing fluorescent bulbs with LED, implementing high-efficiency air conditioners, and adapting smart control system can also help reduce energy consumption in the building. Those also include a less talk about potential due to the difficulty to quantify the savings. Digital technologies can improve the energy efficiency of buildings, both in the short and also long term, and including decarbonization planning. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, most ASEAN member states have acknowledged the importance of energy efficiency by enhancing EE laws, setting national EE target, and determining EE action plan for EE in the building sectors that eventually will contribute to the regional goals under APEC Phase 2. Is analysis under the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook suggests that ambitious energy efficiency measures can potentially reduce building energy demand in the region and achieve the regional energy intensity target by 2025. Supporting the e-regional goals, ASEAN develops a sustainable e-building roadmap. The roadmap aims to provide policy recommendation as a pathway to efficient, flexible, and low-emission buildings. Developing the roadmap is expected to engage key stakeholders and help them develop and implement strategies, plan policies, and programs to reduce the energy demand of buildings and construction sectors. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a point to ponder, investing in net zero carbon emission, efficient and resilient buildings is a cost-effective way to reduce emission and use of fossil fuel, and also improve air quality and contribute to many other benefits to household, society, and governments. However, a significant scale up in investment and changes in regulation are needed to unlock these potential benefits. According to the International Financial Cooperation, the investment opportunities of green building are estimated around $17.8 trillion in East Asia, Pacific, and South Asia, representing over 70% of the global total. While commercial buildings are a key target for decarbonization, the international study has reported that innovation by startups in the commercial and building sector suffer from underinvestment. And startups in the commercial building sector have not been met with much enthusiasm by the venture capital and private equity community. Of the record of $37 billion raised by climate tech startup in the first 3 quarters of 2021, the startup creating digital technologies for decarbonizing commercial buildings only attract around $254 million. Furthermore, the study reported that while the technology for a greening building has been around for decades, the vast majority of venture capital or private equity deals are still for early stage startups, with a very few late stage deals. Could this lack of private sector financing be driven by gaps in building sector policies? I hope that this workshop today will provide you with some answers to such questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a productive and insightful discussion today. Please feel free to share your knowledge and provide your inputs to further benefits to the member states. Again, thank you very much for your kind attention, and would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to the ASEAN Australian Development Cooperation Project Phase 2 or AADCP2 for their generous support to ENC development in ASEAN, and also ASEAN Secretariat IEA for being a good partner of ACE and co-hosting this workshop and generosity in preparation and arrangement made. Again, thank you very much for your kind attention. Stay safe and stay healthy. Back to you, Nela.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nuki. Before we continue to the next agenda, I think we will hold a photo session now. So to keynote speakers and panelists, you are welcome to take a position and turn on your camera. Can you please turn off the slides for a while? Thank you. Hi, can you please turn off the slides for a while? Thank you. Okay, in 3, 2, 1. One more time, 3, 2, 1. Great, thank you everyone. We are now continuing to the following schedule, and I would like to invite my colleague from ACE, Bintang Widana, the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Officer. Bintang has been working on the CSPF project to harmonize the region's residential air-conditioned energy efficiency standard under the same metric. He has an educational background in energy efficiency and conservation, energy policy, and energy system with a master's degree from Socio-Environmental Energy Science from Kyoto University, Japan. He will now deliver the overview of the space cooling in ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bintang.
Thank you, Nella, for the kind introduction. Good morning and good afternoon for everyone to attending the meeting. I am now currently will be bringing the overview of the space cooling in the ASEAN. So in here we can see that the electricity demand projection for residential sector is keep growing, which is dominated by the air conditioning and also the refrigeration. This is the current model from the last ASEAN Energy Outlook, and you can see here that the air conditioning is keep growing until the 2040. Next slide, please. So from the ASEAN Center for Energy, we have the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or the APAC, currently in the phase 2 from 2016 to 2025. We want to increase the RE in the energy mix to 23% in 2025, and then reduce the energy intensity by 20% in 2020 and 32% in 2025 from the 2005 level. In 2020, we already have a new target set that reduce the energy consumption by at least 32% by 2025. And also, as the energy efficiency measures are being increasingly recognized as a mean, not only to ensure sustainability in the region, but also reduce greenhouse gas emission and also improve security of supply and reduce the import costs for the energy sector. Therefore, the energy efficiency is a strategic priority in the ASEAN, and ASEAN promotes the principle of energy efficiency first. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Right, so this is the harmonization and promotion of the EE standard and labeling. We already have the regional policy roadmap for the promotion of higher efficiency of air conditioning in ASEAN, as air conditioner is the most energy consuming appliances in the energy sector. So we want to have this first, and then we will go to the next agenda, that is the lighting, like electric motors and also transformer. The guideline of integration of the energy efficiency in the ASEAN EEE MRA is to provide action step for the IMS to integrate the energy efficiency regulation into the process of ASEAN EEE MRA. Currently, we also prepare the regional product registration system and for the air conditioner and refrigerator in the ASEAN. Next slide, please. For the air conditioner, we already have these adopted, almost all countries adopted the minimum energy performance standard, or the MAPS, using the EER, and also we are moving forward to the CSPF. In here we can see that all of the country already has their own standard. Some is still in the way of the legislation, such as the Brunei Darussalam, which is the newly added EER higher than 2.9 by June next year. Also, we also have some remark that the energy standard and labeling is also will be improved in some country, and this is still the last data from the 2020 from the 2020. Next slide, please. So this is to compare that the maps in the region that we can maps of the air conditioner in the region. As we can see here that Laos, Myanmar, and Brunei, as I said before, is still in the process of the legalization of the standard and labeling, and you can see here Singapore is leading in the market availability of the air conditioner MAPs, and the other country is following through, and with the least efficient we are already moving on from the CSPF higher than lower than 3. The ASEAN standard is higher than 2.9, and this is we are still working on with Philippines. However, the market is readily available for the higher efficiency of the air conditioner. Next slide, please. This is the market availability of the air conditioner. So 90% of the current model in ASEAN has already a cooling capacity with the cooling capacity lower than 4.5 kilowatt, has already passed the ISO CSPF of 3.7. However, only 10% of the current model available in the market is will be able to pass the ISO CSPF of 6.09. This is quite high. That is the maps of from the China of the global leading market of air conditioner. Next slide, please. Regarding the harmonization process of the regional air conditioner, we already have harmonized the testing method to adopt the ISO 5151, and we also about to adopt the evaluation method of the ISO 16358 for the evaluation method. And for the harmonization of maps, we have achieved a target of ER higher than 2.6 or CSPF around the 3.08 by 2020 as the mandatory maps for all fixed and variable drive air conditioner. For now, we still have some following up for this for the legalization, but we are planning to increase the maps for the next regional roadmap of the regional residential air conditioner. For testing infrastructure, currently we are having a round-robin testing in ASEAN countries such as Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and also in Malaysia. And we are now testing for the ISO 5151 and also the ISO 16358. Regarding the reporting, a prototype of product registration system is under development and expected to be completed by mid-2021. We already launched it in the ENC SSN. However, we need a further MRA for using the regional air conditioner. Next slide, please. So this is the benefit of from our harmonization. So before that, we have a different kind of standardization method. Now we want to have this harmonized standard using the ISO bin hour and also the 16358 and 5151. Hopefully, we will have easy access for the manufacturer, local manufacturer, to enter the market in the regional market, so they can share the IC not only in the domestic country, but a domestic product, but also in the region. Next slide, please. However, this is only from the regional air conditioner. We are also asking about the higher efficiency itself in the space cooling. So not only in the residential air conditioner, we also have technical design in the system insulation and weatherproofing the building, also about the smart thermostat, and also the indoor activity sensor. Regarding the high-end efficiency outdoor unit, we are trying to have a pushing the production in the to have a efficient heat exchanger, cascade cooling, individual pump, and also inverter technology in the air conditioning. Next slide, please. So how do we move forward from now? So this is the start, that is the air conditioner. We are keep pushing forward in here, that is increasing the maps, but we need all also in other appliances. So we need the harmonization of testing and evaluation method. Also the capacity building for testing infrastructure. This is good also for the MRA and the regional market, so we can have the one nation database about the testing infrastructure. Also, we need to have a conduct detailed market analysis, that is from the manufacturer and the consumer, and also various relevant analysis, because some countries have to include like 80% of the local component in the manufacturer, and also regarding this subsidy from the country, that we need to have them subsidizing the local manufacturer first, something like that in the policymaking process. Lastly, we want to implement a harmonized phase step approach in updating the ASEAN regional maps. Hopefully in this phase step approach, we can have the new high from the some countries being the old low from the developed country, so that we can have a technology adoption even better from then. Next slide, please. This is the last slide. So thank you all for your attention. Back to you, Nela.
Thank you very much, Bintang. And now I would like to invite Michael Upperman, the Energy Efficiency Policy Analyst from International Energy Agency, who will deliver the overview on cooling policy best practice. Michael has over a decade of experience in energy efficiency and climate change policy across the government, private, and not-for-profit sectors. Michael's work includes projects drawing on the complete policy toolkit of regulations, incentives, and information programs. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michael Upperman.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nella, and it's a pleasure to be here today, everyone. So if we could start with the next slide, thank you. So I wanted to start with a bit of a high-level overview that a number of speakers have touched on today, but with this chart to help provide a little bit more context, that we can see that energy consumption for cooling in Southeast Asia is growing and growing rapidly. You can see here the trend that electricity use for cooling in buildings across the region has grown around 7-fold over the last 30 years from 1990 to 2020, with 12 terawatt hours used in 1990 for cooling in buildings, and that growing to around 80 terawatt hours by 2020. That's close to the annual electricity consumption of the Philippines. At the same time, we've seen air conditioner ownership still relatively low in the region, with around 18% of households in ASEAN countries owning an air conditioner. We see with this, though, a lot of variety and difference in ownership across the region, with some countries having closer to 80% of households owning an air conditioner, compared to less than 10% in some other countries across the region. So all in all, this shows there's significant potential for air conditioner market growth in the ASEAN region. Next slide, please. And we can see in this slide here what that growth might look like. So compared to business and usual policy trends here on this chart, you can see that in 2020, there were around 50 million units of air conditioners across the region, and that's predicted to grow, that without further policy improvements, that we could be seeing 300 million units and significant growth by 2040 across the region. You can see here as well, with Indonesia as a populous and developing nation, accounts for around half of this growth. And so this means that by 2040, around 60% of households on average in ASEAN countries would own air conditioners, with close to 2 per household on average as well. Next slide, thanks. And so this slide here shows the good news is that the future in relation to air conditioner market growth and stock growth does not necessarily mean higher energy consumption, and the future is not set in stone. The IEA Sustainable Development Scenario, which you can see here, outlines a pathway in which government policy can help to drive more sustainable cooling solutions through efficient air conditioners and equipment and more efficient buildings. By deploying more efficient air conditioners along with building energy efficiency improvements, alternative and affordable cooling solutions such as fans can contribute 110 terawatt hours of electricity savings by 2040 compared to current policy settings. That amount of energy is more than the current electricity consumption of Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam combined. And as we can see on the right as well, current policy scenarios could see cooling's share of peak demand increase from around 10% in 2018 to close to 30% by 2040, seeing increased demands and potential issues for the energy system and grid as a whole. But as you can see on the right-hand side there with the green bar, under a more energy efficient sustainable development scenario, this growth could be minimized while still expanding those much needed cooling services to the region. And on top of this, this could help reduce CO2 emissions by almost 30 million tons. And to give you an example there, that's equivalent to the emissions of more than 6 million cars. Next slide, thanks. Other good news, as touched on by both Dr. Brian Motherway and Mr. Bintang Widana, is that looking towards a more energy efficient future doesn't have to come at a higher cost. So we can see here a recent snapshot of the residential air conditioner market in Vietnam, which shows us that more efficient appliances aren't always more expensive, whether we're looking at the upfront purchase price on the left or the lifetime cost on the right. So on the left here, looking at the upfront purchase price, you can see that as the efficiency improves, moving towards the right on the x-axis, there is still a whole range of products underneath that yellow line, the average, with a cooling seasonal performance factor of 4, 5, and 6 that are cheaper than the average price of a less efficient air conditioner with a cooling seasonal performance factor of 3. And on the right, we can see how the average life cycle costs of the same products are lower for energy efficient models. Next slide, please. So I've provided you now with a bit of a snapshot of the state of cooling in Southeast Asia in terms of cooling demand past, present, and potential future scenarios and the greenhouse gas emissions impacts of cooling in the region. But when it comes down to it, which scenario ends up being closer to reality will come down to the policy actions taken by governments across the region to shape a sustainable space cooling future for air conditioners and fans, which is a key focus of our project that we're here to talk about today through these workshops around roadmaps for sustainable buildings and space cooling in ASEAN. And apologies to everyone if you hear some banging noises. Unfortunately, in the age of webinars, it's Murphy's Law that construction work starts in the middle of a presentation. So apologies if there's some background noise today. So here on this slide, I want to talk now about a little bit about the kind of ideal policy packages that can help drive sustainable cooling. And in general, they can be categorized as containing a combination of 3 categories of regulation, information, and incentives. And each of these tools in the policy toolkit can play an important role in driving energy efficiency improvements while helping to deliver multiple benefits, including jobs and employment, energy bill savings to household, businesses, and government, and greenhouse gas emissions reductions and other benefits. So starting on the left, regulations such as minimum energy performance standards for air conditioners and fans can be described as helping to push up the energy efficiency of the whole market. And what do I mean by this? I mean that these type of regulations can help to unlock the largest and often cheapest amounts of energy savings across the economy by removing the worst performing products and practices from the market, or helping to push up the efficiency of the entire market. And then we can see other programs such as information and incentive programs can help to provide a pull factor to encourage consumers to go beyond purchasing the minimum or the market average efficiency products and services. And we'll dive into that in a little more detail. So information programs can help to play important complementary roles. So for example, air conditioner labeling programs help support consumers to make better informed choices and to also lay the foundations for supporting incentive programs by providing that independent and tested framework and guidance on what high efficiency looks like. And there are a whole range of those information programs that we discuss in the roadmap, beyond labeling programs that include cooling audit programs, information campaigns, education and training as well. And lastly, I'll talk briefly about incentive programs. So there are a whole range of incentives available to policymakers in the toolkit that can help to drive energy efficiency improvements, whether these are grants and rebates, auctions, tax incentives, low interest loans, on-bill finance or recognition programs, or equity programs focused on helping low-income households to get access to affordable and sustainable cooling. So all of these can be effectively deployed to grow the market for and the uptake of energy efficient cooling products and services across sectors. And incentive programs can also play an important role, especially during a financial crisis and the economic recovery, to help kickstart the economy. One point to note in terms of helping as well to characterize this pull factor I've referred to is that incentive programs can improve the average efficiency of the sector or product category by helping to raise the bar on the stringency levels of regulations or minimum standards. So when incentive programs help shift the market by making sure that's connected to regulations and minimum energy performance standards, governments can seize on that and have them working hand in hand to ratchet up continuous improvement and help transform the market. So there are also several cross-cutting elements for good policy packages, including compliance, verification and enforcement programs, credible test standards, and mutual recognition agreements, some of those details which Mr. Bintang covered in his previous presentation. And it's important to note as well, while there are a whole range of issues and potential policy measures covered here on screen and in a lot more detail in the roadmap towards sustainable and energy efficient space cooling in ASEAN, they're really a core foundation of measures for a good policy packages. So that consists of minimum energy performance standards and labeling, and underpinned by those harmonized test standards, strong monitoring and verification and enforcement regime as well. Governments can then look to select a range of supporting measures from those other program types and policy types based on their needs. And I'll try and be quick to keep us on track today because we have a great range of speakers coming up shortly. So I'll just touch on one other mechanism, if we can have the next slide, thanks, that can be a really useful approach to bring together a policy package for cooling appliances. And here on screen, we can see an example ladder approach for air conditioners. And so as outlined in the roadmap, a ladder approach can help to provide an ambitious and longer term view of a trajectory for energy efficiency improvements for an appliance category. It can be an effective tool because it can combine policy goals for both minimum energy performance standards, labeling, high efficiency performance standards, and other policy measures all under one roof. And this approach has been advocated for by the Super Efficient Equipment and Appliance Deployment Initiative, and also the COP26 Product Efficiency Call to Action launched just recently, which provides governments, manufacturers, and retailers with a clear timeline for appliance energy efficiency improvements. By providing this long-term certainty, it supports business to make investment decisions to meet and exceed regulatory requirements, while also delivering against efficient and sustainable space cooling goals for countries and the region. And so lastly here, for the next slide, thanks. I'll just quickly cover off some of the things we've discussed today are covered in more detail in the roadmap towards sustainable and energy efficient space cooling in ASEAN. So the roadmap covers off and examines 12 types of policy measures under these three categories of regulation, information, and incentives. And we look at the current status of policies across ASEAN, some of the milestones to drive improvements from 2025, 2030, and for zero carbon goals. And we also look at some of the near-term actions that governments can take to support energy efficiency improvements for cooling, as well as looking at some examples and case studies. So I'll end just reiterating that we know there are these cost-effective opportunities existing out there for improving cooling and efficiency, and effective and timely policy support is really critical to help unlock this opportunity. So I'll leave it there and hand back to Ms. Nella. Thank you all for your time, and really looking forward to the panel discussion that we have coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And next is the panel session with Dr. Ksenia Petrichenko will moderate. She is the Energy Efficiency Policy Analyst from the International Energy Agency. She leads the work of the Energy Efficiency Division related to buildings. Before joining to IEA, Dr. Ksenia served as an Economic Affairs Officer with the Energy Division of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, or ESCAP. Dr. Ksenia holds a PhD and a master's degree in environmental science from Central European University and a master's in economics in the energy sector from the Higher School of Economics, Moscow. Dr. Ksenia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone who are joining from different time zones. It's my pleasure to be moderator for this panel discussion on advancing energy efficient cooling in Southeast Asia. We have a very interesting and diverse panel today, who I will be introducing just in a minute. But before we start, I would just like to encourage your active participation in our discussion and use the chat function to pose your questions, especially if you have a question to a specific speaker. Please indicate their name, and we will do our best to allocate sufficient time to take questions from the audience at the end of the discussion. So with that, I would like to ask all panelists to turn their cameras, and I will give a short introduction to each of them, and then I give them floor to speak a bit more in detail about their work before diving into some of the questions. So today with us, we have Mr. Patrick Blake, Program Management Officer of United for Efficiency Initiative, the United Nations Environment Program. Have Dr. Supachai Sampao, Chief Energy Efficiency Standard and the Conservation Group of Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency, Ministry of Energy, Thailand. We have Mr. Pak Sokharavut, Deputy Director General of General Directorate of Environmental Protection, Cambodia Ministry of Energy, of Environment. Ms. Achara Pruni, Managing Director of PAC Corporation, Thailand. Mr. Mark Lister, Managing Partner of Asia Clean Energy Partners. And Ms. Apurupa Gorti, from International Forum for Environment, Sustainability and Technology. Let's give a virtual welcome to our panelists today. And let's start with a quick round of introduction from the panelists so that they give you a bit more details about the work they're doing and their perspectives on sustainable cooling issues and opportunities in the ASEAN region. I would like to start with Mr. Patrick Blake. Patrick, you have been working for a while with the United for Efficiency Initiative, supporting different countries in the transition to energy efficient appliances and equipment, including space cooling appliances. So could you please talk about your work, including your work on regional harmonization of minimum energy performance standards and labeling? And the floor is yours, please, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Ksenia. And thank you to ACE and IEA for having us here today. And pleasure to be connected also with all the other colleagues on the panel and in the session today. So I believe there's a few slides that would be available as well. And those go through some of the work that is ongoing in the region, but just to briefly highlight as well that this work is in collaboration with ASEAN Center for Energy, and we see cooling as a large opportunity As Senya mentioned, I'm coming from United for Efficiency, which is a global initiative on energy efficient lighting appliances and equipment. And through that, we've done a number of different analysis and wanted to highlight some of that here today. And that's what you see on the slide here, showing the savings potential from what we call our country savings assessment. So here it's, of course, focused on the ASEAN region and showing the savings with 3 different scenarios going out to 2040. So those numbers are aligned as well with what we heard from Michael previously, but just to highlight the growth that you see going out into the future and the opportunity to implement policies such as through the roadmap that was mentioned. This assessment is on the 5 products that we cover, so lighting, refrigerators, air conditioners, motors, and transformers. But room air conditioners is the bulk of the savings. So it's a bit small, but you see it on the bottom right-hand side there. And that's broken down between those 5 products. And the gray part is the savings from room air conditioners. So that's just another reason that it is important that the ASEAN region prioritizes energy efficient cooling. And of course, you are doing that. Going on to the next slide, I also wanted to highlight some of the work that is ongoing and aligned with what is in the roadmap as well. And we, together with ACE and a few partners, including Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and IEA, we've developed recommendations for the ASEAN region, focusing in on room air conditioners. And this is to update previous aligned MEPs through the ASEAN Shine program. So to highlight briefly on those, you see here a few points within that, within the recommendations. And that includes the adoption of a aligned common metric throughout the ASEAN region for both inverter and fixed speed ACs. And to consider the ISO 16358 temperature bin to be aligned throughout the ASEAN region. We looked at the different temperatures within ASEAN, and of course, there are temperature differences, but we came to the conclusion that there was benefits for alignment across the region. And then to briefly highlight on the potential levels that could be developed, and what we recommend is what you see on the right-hand side. What we've developed is at the global level recommendations, what we call model regulations, and we've adapted those to the ASEAN region. And it shows the opportunity for ASEAN to update the levels that have previously been developed, and that follows globally policy trends globally, including in some work in Africa as well. You see there Rwanda's MEPS level, but also in major manufacturing countries, including China, where a lot of the products do come from. So through that, we have developed 2 levels so to allow time for development and of the manufacturing lines in ASEAN, a level in 2023, and then an updated level in 2025. So that aligns with what we've developed in the U4E model regulations, and as I mentioned, other policies globally as well. And it's important that these are implemented sooner rather than later due to the growth that we saw. And perhaps just to highlight as well, the graph that you see here on the right isn't all technologies. There's technologies above this as well. We heard last year from the Global Cooling Prize of air conditioners well above that. So there are technologies, and the market is moving quickly. So it's important that policies do as well. So there's a lot more within those recommendations, and can share those as we go forward. Perhaps just to conclude on my side, that the importance of monitoring, verification, and enforcement is also equally important alongside MEPS. So for countries to test products and to register those within a system, and we're working with ACE on a regional product database for products to be entered into within that. So that allows the countries to really ensure that the products in the markets are compliant with the standard. So with that, I'd like to conclude and hand it back to Senya. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for your introductory remarks. A number of very important points, which I think we will pick up for sure during the discussion. But for now, I would like to move to our next panelist, Dr. Supachai Sampao. Dr. Supachai, you have been with the Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency of Ministry of Energy for 27 years, so you have a lot of experience to share from Thailand, and I would like to give you the floor to talk about Thailand's experience with the development of energy efficient standards and regulations, specifically when it comes to space cooling, and perhaps if you could say a few words about the approach of Thailand to harmonization of standards, as well as we heard from Patrick about its importance. Please, Dr. Supachai, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. For the air conditioner development in Thailand, I think in long time ago, the government tried to push the policy to support the high efficiency of air conditioning and refrigerator in Thailand around 1998 by ECAP. But in the first time, maybe not success because because we have only policy and want to make a number 5 label, so that the second time ECAP and the manufacturer in Thailand setting the steering committee and share information to and have a meeting how to go together with high efficiency for air conditioner. That the first time number 5 label be held around before 1998. I think that after that, for the government agency, we have a policy to support this program with high energy efficiency and support by the laboratory facility, laboratory test from the government to promote high efficiency in air condition in Thailand. And nowadays Thailand have a standard method reference with ISO 5151 that you know, the TC in Thailand is the regulator agency to control the minimum energy standard. The Thailand need to harmonize standard with ASEAN AMS, ASEAN Member States, and go together with the standard method that we know we use ISO 16398 to calculate the level of map in ASEAN. That's right. For TC in Thailand, they regulate the level map with the MRA of ASEAN region. This is the story for the HAPS and map in Thailand to nowadays. Thank you, Kasem.
Thank you very much, Dr. Supachai, for your introductory remarks and for the outline of activities of Thailand on the standards. Now, our next panelist is Mr. Pak Sokharavut from Ministry of Environment, Cambodia. Mr. Pak, we know that Cambodia has a number of ongoing activities related to sustainable cooling in light of recent ratification of Kigali Amendment, and updated NDC of Cambodia also mentions sustainable cooling as one of the mitigation measures. I also know that Cambodia is developing National Cooling Action Plan, and you have been the focal point for Montreal Protocol implementation since 2002. So we really would like to hear about your work and ongoing activities in Cambodia in regard to sustainable space cooling. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, seniors. Good afternoon from Cambodia, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have a great honor to participate and share experience on Cambodia's space cooling policy and program, especially for the NCAP development in Cambodia. As you may know, Cambodia has been ratified the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol on 8 April 2021, and NCAP is under development that provide the framework to control and reduce emissions from the cooling sector by using the low global warming potential refrigerant to phase down the HFC consumption by 80% in 2045, followed by the Kigali Amendment obligation. And you know, is NCAP developed is the linkage between the national determined contribution and the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, as well as linkage to the Sustainable Development Goal. NCAP developed will be cover the space cooling in building, cold chain and refrigeration, food and healthcare, mobile air conditioner, and industrial process cooling. That including to application for electrical equipment labeling with energy efficiency, develop the building code and enforcement certification to improve cooling system in Cambodia, and also promote sustainable energy practice in manufacturing, as well as sustainable energy practice in the food and beverage industry. To implement of such activity, we oversee the challenge and barrier. As you may know, Cambodia is a not manufacturing country, while HFC alternative refrigerant is in some sectors still not available in the global market, and some available with the flammable refrigerant. So NCAP is under developing and need time for effective implementation. As well as the Kigali implementation plan development is under discussion and will take some time to be in place around at the end of 2022 or early 2023. In addition, the capacity of technicians regarding the flammable refrigerant handling still limited and need more training and awareness program to conduct. In addition, the equipment tool for the vocational training center need to be well equipped and trained for avoid of risk and leakage of refrigerant into the atmosphere. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pak, for your introduction and the outline of activities in Cambodia on sustainable cooling. Indeed, it's great to see that a number of actions are being taken at the national level in the country. So thank you very much. I would like to turn to our next panelist, Ms. Achara Prumi, and we're shifting gears a little bit and going more into private sector's perspective. Ms. Achara is holding the management position of PAC Corporation, who is dealing with some very interesting innovative technologies, also in the area of space cooling. So I would like just to give the floor to Ms. Achara to talk herself about the work of the corporation and how it fits into a broader picture of sustainable transition towards more energy efficient, climate friendly cooling. Please, Ms. Achara. Could you please unmute yourself? We can't hear you right now.
Hi. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Achara Prumi, Managing Director of PAC Corporation Thailand. Right now, we're doing the business about the clean technology, focusing on air conditioning and waste heat recovery from the air conditioning to heat up water without electricity. Our product and services, first of all, we recognize that the air conditioner was widely installed in Thailand and in Asian country. We are in the hot and humid climate, so we have to install air conditioners a lot in our country. So we start the business by curiosity about how can we produce some benefits from that waste from the air conditioners, and we then begin with the heat recovery water heater to use the waste heat of the aircon, and it can be, reduce the cost of energy consumption of the air conditioning around 20%, and we will get hot water for free. After that, we expand the product to be solar air conditioners, to use the solar energy to produce the electricity and feed in the air conditioners, and it can be, reduce the electricity around 80%. After that, we install to many hotels and resorts which installed in the island, and we use seawater and water to cooling the air conditioners, which is much more efficient comparing with air-cooled air conditioners. Right now, in our roles at a private sector, we think that we try to invent the new technology to introduce to the customer. Right now, we have many kind of air conditioner, but most of all is the conventional one, and most of them is producing by the big manufacturer in Japan, China, or in Western country. But we think that if we can innovate some area-based innovation that's suitable for Asian country area, it will be very suitable and it will much more efficient in order to serve our region accordingly with their, problems and solve their solutions. So I think that in our perspective as a private sector, we have a mission to deliver high quality innovative product and solutions to the customer, which is maybe consumer, the business sector, such as hotel, resort, hospital, to reduce their energy consumption. And if it's possible, maybe we can expand to government sector, because of it will be the big market. They use a lot of air conditioners in their buildings. But it will then come again that sometimes this innovation product cannot be marketed in their countries due to they have lots of regulations limited to expand the market. So today we will maybe come to share my perspective with all of you that is it any possibility to support new technology and lower the regulations and let some new technology to expanding and continuously growing rapidly rather than the past to accelerate our energy efficiency together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chara. I think you picked on very important points, and I think in our discussion we already see there are two very interlinked dimensions on policy and technology when it comes to cooling. I think both of them are extremely important, and I'm looking forward to discuss it today. Now I'm giving the floor to our next panelist, Mr. Mark Lister, who is managing partner of Asia Clean Energy Partners and has diverse experience on various projects and programs on accelerating clean energy transition in Asian Pacific region. Mark, I would like just to give the floor to you to talk about your work in the context of space cooling, sustainable space cooling in the region, and maybe outline a couple of key points you would like to raise today during our discussion.
Great, thank you, Ksenia, and thanks to the IEA and the ASEAN Centre for Energy for inviting me along today. As Ksenia introduced, I'm managing partner for Asia Clean Energy Partners. We're a small consultancy and advisory business working across Southeast Asia on a range of issues, including a number of connections with cooling. So I might just talk about a few of those and maybe mention in this question of finance and other things we can pick up in the discussion. So I want to introduce a couple of things, and then we can leave the rest for discussion. But on one part of this around finance, and certainly the acceleration of sustainable cooling, is the need for collaboration on some of these issues to solve problems. And I think that's a touch point that you also mentioned, Kunachara. It's nice to see you again. But working together between different parts of the industry and also with government to bring regulation to bear and help to actually make it have traction in the market. So I'm working with UNEP and the Cool Coalition, which is a multi-stakeholder platform, really trying to bring together coordination on some of these activities, including on national cooling action plans, as we heard is happening in Cambodia. But looking at how to link up on finance as well, because there's one thing to make plans. We then need to think about how these plans can be financed. And there's an increasing flow of finance into the region and around the world for decarbonisation efforts, and that includes for cooling. So how do we link up the availability of that finance with the ability of ASEAN member states to actually request it? So having a national cooling action plan is one thing. Being able to then fashion that as a request for both finance for that development process, but also the readiness for implementation of the actions in the plan. So through the Cool Coalition and through UN Environment, we're actually working to convene a group of multilateral development banks, which includes Asian Development Bank and World Bank and most of the development financiers from around the regions, to try and provide guidance to countries on this very question so that they can actually link their own cooling facilities and their own interest in funding these kinds of facilities, or funding these kinds of activities, I should say, with their own internal needs. So being able to actually create country guidance on accessing cooling finance. So that's a piece of work that we're doing there, among many other things at the UNEP level. Importantly, at the local level, it's very to unlock finance for more cooling. I think we just heard from again Kunachara talking about the opportunities that happen through new business models and business models that can understand local conditions and work with local conditions. So another thing that I'm involved in is the Private Finance Advisory Network, or PFAN for short. And PFAN is something convened by UNIDO and REAP globally. And it's really a long-running program to help with business development support, so coaching businesses to create, who maybe have a new business idea, to create a solid business plan and an investable proposition that they can actually bring to investors, mostly private investors, as you can tell from the name, Private Finance Advisory Network. So that matchmaking and facilitation process is something that PFAN's been doing for 15 years or so, and they've closed many investments for companies, over 2 billion worth of invested projects. They have had a thematic focus on cooling, so looking at particularly on cooling projects and what business models can be put forward on that. One very prevalent model is cooling as a service. So looking at the servitization of cooling away from just selling space cooling equipment to selling cooling itself. And this is a different kind of business model, which is really helping to unlock new ways of thinking about cooling that overcome those upfront capital costs otherwise required for investments. That brings me to my last area, which is in the question of in cooling as a service. We actually need very strong, for finance needs, we need very strong measures of savings, energy savings verification. So we need to be able to document and understand what energy efficiency savings we're making. I'm not talking about refrigerants at the moment, but particularly on that side. So in many ways, it's very similar to the energy savings performance contract that energy services companies would be looking at. And we find in the Southeast Asia region, there is a real lack of people who are skilled in this area to be able to put forward propositions that can be financed, because they can actually demonstrate energy savings in that way. And so I'm also the chair globally of something called the Efficiency Valuation Organization, or EVO, which is training people in this area, the qualifications that they have for measurement and verification professionals. This is something very much needed in Southeast Asia to try and build the market for informed project development, and also for bankable or financeable projects in cooling, and certainly across all of energy efficiency areas. So that's a lot to touch on in just a few minutes. I'm happy to build on some of those ideas and talk more in the discussion that comes. Thanks very much. Back to you, Ksenia.
Thank you very much, Mark, for sharing your experience throughout a number of roles you're involved in, and outlining a number of key things we should discuss today, leading up to implementation of the plans and the regulation. And you mentioned the importance of collaboration, finance, verification, and capacity. So I think I would like to also encourage all speakers for our next round of questions to think about this notion of implementation. As we heard, we have a roadmap, we have a number of regional processes going on and national regulation, but how do we shift towards the actual implementation in the space cooling area? But before that, I would like to introduce our panelist, Ms. Apurupa Gorti, who is bringing an interesting perspective to this discussion. Ms. Apurupa is a researcher, and she is interested in urban sustainability and inclusive development. So I would like to ask her to share some of the insights from her research, and kind of shift our perspective on cooling from the point of view of people, and also how gender dimension comes to the picture from her research work. Please, Apurupa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and it will be an absolute pleasure to shed some light on my research on gender and cooling. At the very outset, thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel. It's truly an honor to be speaking alongside such an accomplished panel of experts. And I think before I begin or jump into the actual gender element, I would like to create a clear demarcation between air conditioning and thermal comfort, especially for the ASEAN region, which has, strategies like stacking for cooling. There's still, less than 10% of households with air conditioners. So I think it's really important to understand that it's in a quickly warming world. cooling or thermal comfort is larger than offering energy efficient and climate friendly cooling alone. It involves a use of a variety of tactics and technologies that for an everyday person. And I think given that a lot of the issues related to cooling stem from a history with Montreal Protocol, one of very important global agreements with, excellent positive change that it was able to bring about. And Kigali Amendment from the Montreal Protocol is now looking at climate change related issues like energy efficiency and climate friendly refrigerant gases. So when cooling comes from that perspective, bringing gender in is tricky. Within the Montreal Protocol community, if we look at gender, the farthest it has gone is with respect to the need to increase women's participation in technical roles as engineers or researchers and technicians. My own research in this has shown that the representation of women is fairly small in a country like India when it comes to technicians and engineers in the sector. China, through targeted interventions, has been able to increase the representation of women in these roles of engineers, technicians, and researchers within this sector. And there's a lot of work happening within the Montreal Protocol community with respect to retaining and increasing the women in the sector. What we do not know enough about, or there isn't enough being done about, is as women as end users for cooling. This is where the distinction between air conditioning and the larger idea of thermal comfort becomes very important. How do women access thermal comfort in their homes, at workplaces, both formal and informal, and in public spaces? This needs to be examined. This is where the ozone cells and urban development bodies can come together. This is where architects, building consultants, and policymakers can come together. I will obviously get into this, give more data as we, get into the conversation. But I must say that cooling or access to thermal comfort is not currently an issue that is being that is under the SDGs. It is a marginal environmental issues in respect to everything else that we're seeing, and it is not considered an important human rights issue. So in tropical countries where we're talking about increasing temperatures, heat waves, urban island effects, lack of proper ventilation in indoor environments, it does become important for an especially marginalized and vulnerable group like that of women. The fact remains that there isn't enough data, and therefore there aren't enough policy designs that cater to this group. But I think that is changing as I speak.
Thank you very much, Aparupa. Very interesting view, and also shifting the perspective towards cooling as a need for thermal comfort when we talk about space cooling, and looking at different groups, specifically with the question of gender and how women approach that. Thank you very much for all your introductions. I think we have a number of interesting issues which have been highlighted, which I think some of them would be really good to pick up in the discussion. But as I mentioned, I think let's approach the discussion from the point of view, so what is needed to be done in order to really implement the actions on sustainable space cooling. We heard from Michael's presentation about the roadmap and policy package, which includes different policy instruments, and we have a number of representatives from ASEAN member states in the room today who are really interested and get expert views on what the country needs to, different country need in order to transition towards more sustainable, climate-friendly, energy-efficient space cooling. So with that in mind, of course, there are different opportunities in different countries, there are different challenges. So I just like to encourage you to think about this question of implementation. And I would like to start the discussion. Perhaps I will turn again to Patrick to start from more regional perspective. Patrick, you talked a lot about standards and efforts on harmonization, but what your perspective is like when it comes to countries doing the actions, figuring out what policies they need to put in place? If you would need to give them advice, what do you think are the most effective policies when it comes to sustainable space cooling, and what can they start with?
Great, thanks, Sonia. And yeah, a lot to go off based on the remarks of all the panelists. On what can be done, we really see minimum energy performance standards as being the foundation of the market transformation, and particularly I'm referring to in the room air conditioners sector. And of course, that's one part of the broader cooling, but in the part that I'm working on, so I'll focus on that. And that's important, as I highlighted in the presentation, for the ASEAN region and the countries to develop and implement those policies. And it's not a static policy, it needs to be updated over time, and that's what is being done to progress with technologies. And that's important that those are developed at a level that is ambitious and continues to drive the market further. So I think that's a foundational policy that the countries do need to consider in the cooling sector. But it's part of a broader package as well. That's a foundational part, but it's important that other parts are brought in, and some of those are highlighted as far as other incentives. And I think it's really good that those are thought together in a comprehensive manner. So not only just working on MEPs or policies, but thinking how some stakeholders, such as manufacturers, can be incorporated, and other, on the gender side, we heard as well. And through incentive programs, financial mechanism, for example, a lot of those parts can be brought in to ensure that stakeholders in reducing the cost of products through a financial mechanism. So we worked in some countries on that, and tried to think through innovative ways, such as we've seen examples of repayment of energy efficient products through electricity bills, and also another model that we've worked on is repayment through on wage repayment. So working with particular companies in countries, and then for their employees to be able to purchase more efficient products, and then they repay that through their salary. So there's different ways that the sector can be brought in. And then finally, on the monitoring, verification, and enforcement is another part that would recommend to the government side to prioritize as well. MEPS is important, but still is testing of products and ensuring that those products are entered into a system. So one part that countries can do is develop a product registration system, and there's examples of some countries in ASEAN of that, and then opportunities for them to collaborate as well at the ASEAN level. That's it for me. Back to you, Sonia. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you very much for putting it into context of the policy package and really different interlinked elements. I think it's very much in line with Mark's comments from his introductory remarks. So maybe I will give the floor to Mark to reflect on what Patrick says, and also maybe to think about the key barriers for acceleration of action as well. And Patrick mentioned different financial instruments, and also the importance of monitoring, verification, and enforcement, which you also mentioned before, Mark. So could you give some insights and maybe go a bit more into details on some of these aspects?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think it's quite a sweeping kind of package that is really required. And my introduction was really a little bit about collaboration as well between different elements. I think we should also think about interplay between these different policy mechanisms. So I think MEPs, as you said, fundamental, along with building codes and other things, as a kind of a foundational policy for some of this activity. Of course, to promote really good practice, MEPs will provide a minimum level by their very name, but we need to think about ways to go beyond to best performance and beyond to above building code performance. And that's really where I think some of the other aspects of the roadmap come in. So around industry awareness, really raising the profile of these issues as well. So I like to think in terms of, it was on the slide that Michael Upperman put up around between regulation, incentives and information, but that informational role for government, especially in countries where the understanding of cooling as an important issue is not necessarily that strong. That's a very important role for government to play and help to bring all of these policy issues together and actually pave the way for incentives to be taken up, because we do see incentive programs that are designed and then maybe not even taken up. So around that issue of sort of really raising the bar and working together, there is some work going on. I mentioned before the Cool Coalition. There's some interest in looking at how to really create that market for higher efficiency equipment that goes well beyond the low level of that may be set in some countries as a minimum standard, and that requires collaboration between government and industry. There's industry who are willing to supply high efficiency space cooling, but it's not necessarily able to be supplied at competitive rates. So how can incentives then come in around basically subsidizing the right sorts of equipment, looking at equipment labeling as well, very, very important in that awareness part of it. But all of I guess my point is to say that all of these things work together to actually then sort of unlock markets. So it's not that you can put in one thing or other, they actually all have to work in concert with each other, which is what makes it so difficult. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, definitely very, very important points. And how do we go beyond maps and beyond the regulation and drive the market transformation, engage the industry? I would be interested to hear from representatives of our member states, Thailand and Cambodia, but I think I might save it to the end, because I want to hear more industry perspective and maybe get insights from Ms. Achara, who has been in the industry for a while, and if she could share maybe the perspective from Thailand and how the innovative solutions which PSC Corporation is working with were accepted in the country, and how private sector can also contribute to this transition towards more sustainable space cooling, and maybe a few insights on how the dialogue with the government and other stakeholders was taking place to offer these energy efficient solutions to the market. Ms. Achara, could you please share your insights? We can't hear you. Could you check your microphone? No, still can't hear you.
Unmute myself. Okay.
Perfect.
I think okay. So sorry about this. For my point of view, I think in the business side, we try to develop the new technology to serve to the market, and right now we are, as the innovator and the business sector, we try to introduce new technology to match with the problem in the region, and sometimes we facing about many challenges, such as we need the customer to understanding our technology. We need the finance to support our innovation, because of at the first stage we cannot have the first customer very easy due to it is very new innovation and product and services. So I think in our part, I think if our government support the startup or SME to invent some new technology and promote the innovation in the it's like the sandbox or something policy to let them try the new technology and let them go to the market without any limitation. But I'm not sure how it should be for that case. In our industry, it is very hard for the small company to compete with the big one. In Thailand, as you know, that we are in the biggest market, and we are the top export of the air conditioner product. But it seems like it's a space for the big player, but not the space for the innovator product. So how can we encourage the small business and the SME or startup to show that innovation and have a very good support from the government? I don't think it only in Thailand. I think it's in Asian country, because of we are right now promoting about software based or software innovation, such as fintech or something. But the innovation like clean technology, it is a hardware based sometimes, and it's very hard to produce, hard to introduce to the market due to it to have the highly investment. And also, if we are the small company, maybe sometimes we cannot be access to finance support. Because of we are very small, we have no idea how to get involved with PFAN, something like that, Mark, that you mentioned. So I think this kind of support need to be facilitate private sector as our company or any others company to help them in order to gain more market and focusing on the energy efficiency product and solutions. I would like to mention a little bit about the obstacling in our market. I mean in clean technology in Thailand, because of it's not like in this space or in this industry, clean tech or energy efficiency product or energy saving aircon is not like the key product of the country. So we lack of the support from the government or many institute that to help us to advance this kind of technology. Sometimes we're focusing on food, agriculture, any other sector or industry. So I think it will be very advantage if the policymaker come to promote this kind of industry, the clean tech industry in Thailand or in Asian country. Yes, this are all about me for this stage.
Thank you very much, Ms. Achara. A very interesting perspective from SMEs and private sector, indeed. So I'm thinking maybe I will stay with Thailand for a while and ask Dr. Supachai to reflect on Ms. Achara's remarks and also on previous panelists' remarks regarding both policy package and supporting instruments for regulation, because Thailand has standards in place. It's one of the biggest exporters of air conditioners. And what kind of supporting mechanisms do you think are important to both for local industry, but also for increasing the bar, as Mark said, to increasing the levels of energy efficient equipment and overall space cooling in your country. Dr. Supachai, please.
Thank you, Senior. That's the Ms. Achala mentioned to the policy and supporting by government. In my opinion, I think Thailand, we have many government agencies to support the clean technology in Thailand, such as NSTDA in Thailand. They have the 100% support for startup in Thailand. In last year, I talked with in a meeting with the NSTDA about startup program. They can support the private sector in Thailand for subsidy around 10%, but different from Ministry of Energy, because we support for the budget around maybe 30% to 30% to support the budget for incentive. And another one, I saw a BOI in Thailand to serve the innovation to help us to make a research and develop the new technology in air conditioning sector. And nowadays, DEDE and World Bank and the IW in the IW Department of Thailand, we try to support the local manufacturer in Thailand to develop the control box for inverter in Thailand. Now we have around 11 companies to join this program to learn about how to design the technology inverter, because we know maybe the fixed speed inverter cannot develop the high level energy efficiency to go with our policy. But in our opinion, we think if the local manufacturing in Thailand can design and produce the control box of inverter and can produce and maybe export, I think for Thailand, the government can revise the MAPS level and revise the MAPS level for the development in Thailand. I think that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Supachai. That I think very much reflects on Patrick's point regarding importance of update and revision of the standards. And also it's great to hear that Thailand has support programs for local manufacturers. Thank you very much. I want to pick on some of the points Ms. Arupura mentioned in her introductory, and maybe ask her to provide some reflections on our discussion regarding policy package. But from the point of view, I think Aparupa, you mentioned the notion of energy access and needs of people in terms of cooling and thermal comfort. From policymakers' point of view, what do you think they should take on board in development of policies from the point of view of this thermal comfort and access, and maybe how the gender perspective can be also incorporated in the policy development.
For sure. Thanks, actually, that's a great question. And before we can even jump into policymakers being able to create great policies, I think we need to begin with data. At this point, there's very little understanding of how women are accessing their thermal comfort needs. So I'll give you an example. There's when a study in Delhi looked at surveying Delhi households for their energy efficiency practices in relation to AC use. They broke it down into what men were aware of and what women were aware of. And what they came out with was that women were generally not aware of things like star label or climate change or energy use of air conditioners. Now, from a gender perspective, I would actually flip that question and ask, what are the energy saving behaviors women adopt? And the reason this becomes important is, as I mentioned, in a lot of these households, there are stacking strategies adopted. So you use fans, or you open a window to allow ventilation. And when this is, I think, some kind of it bears testimony to women's tendency to use or be more energy saving in their behaviors, is because when you look at the air conditioner use, it peaks at between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. in the night, which is when we assume that all the residents of the house are at home. When we look at the air conditioner use between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m., it is at its least. Between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. again at its least. Presumably, these are times that women spend in household chores. So there is a need to flip these questions to bring in the gender perspective. When we just say, here are the things that are energy saving or efficient or climate friendly, and then we try to bring in a gender element, we often lose out on the contribution of gender. The next thing that I will bring in as important for policymakers is the cooling action plans. And recently there was an excellent published guidelines for developing the NCAP for countries. Now, when I did a quick Control F and looked for gender in it, there was nothing. When I looked for women in it, there was nothing. They only briefly allude to vulnerable communities as a section that needs to be catered to. And I think this is what a lot of countries are going to pick up on. They're probably not going to have a gender element in their National Cooling Action Plan. And given that these are where policy roadmaps for thermal comfort will stem for future populations, it's going to be a bit of a loss. The third thing that I think is important is to create standards for thermal comfort. And these need to be, they exist, but they need to be refined to account or to take into account gender disaggregated data. Now, there is, of course, the cooling action plans, but there are several affordable housing projects that are coming up in these countries. Most of the buildings are expected to be constructed in the future. They aren't here yet. And there are several smart city projects. So all of these need data for the inclusion of gender. And I think, as I will circle back to my original point of requiring gender disaggregated data or gender-based studies or gender inclusive studies, because such a lens is necessary, such a data is necessary to create these policies. I think the key lies in asking the questions, even if we don't get them right first. When I study an industry like the air conditioning industry, I'm often working with a sector that is male dominated. When I'm looking at how Indian industries are going to cope with the Kigali Amendment, how do I include gender lens there? I think a great place to start is to have more women that I interview for such a study. When I'm working with green cooling technology makers, it brings me great joy that I sit on the same panel as Ms. Achara, because she is one of the few people I've met in a male-dominated sector again. And I will say this: surveys on anything related to cooling must be gender disaggregated, must collect gender disaggregated data. And I think this is the first step to inclusive policies.
Thank you very much, Ms. Apurupa, for your gender perspective on cooling. It's great to have you on the panel to bring this to our attention. And you mentioned the importance including it into policy development and national cooling action plans or other strategic documents. So I want to turn the floor to Mr. Pak, because I know he's very much involved in development of national cooling action plan for Cambodia, which is very comprehensive, cuts across different sectors, and also looks at the question of access to cooling in different cooling sectors. So, Mr. Pak, just reflecting both on what Ms. Apurupa said regarding the gender, but also what other speakers brought to the table in terms of the implementation and further actions, and coming from the plan towards the projects or actions. I know the plan is still under development, but what is your vision for implementation? What is your vision for supporting policies for space cooling in Cambodia, and maybe other aspects which we heard about, which needs to be integrated into the implementation of the National Cooling Action Plan?
Thank you very much, Senior. Yes, actually, we are under developing the National Cooling Action Plan, and this National Cooling Action Plan will be integrated with the linkage with the national determined contribution and also the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol and also the Sustainable Development Goal. That will be cover also the under the especially for the energy efficiency, so that that will be encourage the user to comply to apply for the energy, most the equipment that have efficiency of energy. And but however, because Cambodia is not the manufacturing country, so that most of the AC we import from the other countries, like from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and also from China, so that we rely on what we have in the market at the regional. And in terms of the other, like the Kigali Amendment, so that we have to reduce the consumption, including the refrigerant, that the energy that the equipment that use a low GWP used in Cambodia, and also with energy efficiency. That we have been also in order to avoid the leakage, and also the cost of the energy that they use in the air conditioner, so that the maintenance and installation of the equipment should be also considered as one of the priority for the need to be the training for the technician, in order to avoid leakage, and also energy consumption is not so high. That my point of view.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pak. And I think with that intervention, you just answered one of the questions we got from the audience regarding whether space cooling policies also and regulations, whether they include any measures on refrigerants. And I think you just gave a very good example how policy can both include requirements for energy efficient space cooling, but also requirements for climate-friendly refrigerants and reducing the leakages and building capacity in the industry to make sure that this is minimized. I would like to thank all the panelists for answering questions. In the time remaining, I want to open the floor for some of the questions we received through chat from the audience. So we just answered one of them, and a couple of more we can take before we close the panel. So one of the question is regarding minimum energy performance standards. Maps increase improvements of maps or making them more stringent reduce the energy intensity. However, it may also encourage dumping of lower efficient appliances as they're moving out from the, let's say, official market towards gray market. Is there any recommendation or consideration for how not only reduce energy intensity of appliances and increase their energy efficient, but also reduce the waste from disregarded equipment and appliances? So I would just pose this question, and any panelists who want to answer, please let me know. But maybe Patrick, if you want to start, because I think it's very much close to your remarks.
Yeah, no, I can start. Thanks. So I think it goes along well with what's been mentioned in some of the discussion of thinking of this in a comprehensive manner, and not only just implementing a policy for efficiency, but the interlinkages with other policies as well. So not only to develop MEPs, but also thinking about how that product will be used throughout its lifetime and then disposed of, recycled, or reused. And thinking about that at the outset, and to have policies for that. So the government, of course, together with industry, can set up infrastructure to ensure that those products are properly managed at their end of life, and the refrigerants with them are properly handled as well, and the material is recycled when possible. So I think thinking that through at the as part of the broader scope is certainly important, and then just to highlight on the refrigerant side as well that there are, as was mentioned, the policies can include not only efficiency but also refrigerant, and that's one thing we have seen countries doing more often now, and the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol also calls for that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Any other panelists want to address this question or previous question regarding combination of energy efficiency and refrigerants? Just please go ahead and mute yourself. Okay. I don't see any volunteers. We have a number of other questions as well. So the next one is actually about passive cooling, and I think we haven't talked about it that much during this panel. So I want to pose the question regarding the importance of passive cooling for sustainable cooling strategies or policies, and hear your views on that. Part of the question also mentions achievement of sustainable development goal and how passive cooling can help us to do that. Anyone wants to address this question?
I'll say a couple of things, if that's okay, Xenia. It picks up a little bit on Aparupa's comments, and you know, thanks for raising those issues around what needs to be included here. The comment that I want to make is that there is really a role for, I mentioned awareness raising, but within government, because there's typically not a ministry for cooling. There will be a ministry for environment, a ministry for energy, or maybe other ministries involved. And so it kind of can fall between the cracks, and increasingly, and that's also the case for, you know, my remarks about finance and banks and even multilateral development banks like the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank active in our region. they're organized around country programs, and they're not necessarily organized. It's difficult for them to actually mainstream cooling within their operations as well. So actually guidance on all of the different SDGs that are addressed by cooling is very, very important for countries to be able to sell this to, for example, ministries of agriculture, because cooling is fundamental to food security and even cold chains for vaccines and medical. So we actually got a health outcome there. There may be gender outcomes that we're missing. There may be other outcomes that other ministries could actually get behind cooling and support and accelerate cooling if we do a better job of explaining all of the SDGs that are actually addressed by cooling. And on the point, just briefly about passive cooling, I think I totally agree that the question is how to achieve cooling, not how to replace inefficient air conditioners. So we should be thinking in terms of the thermal resources and prioritizing what we have and what we can cheaply deploy, especially in places where high equipment costs, and actually kind of creating energy demand is not necessarily the objective. We can potentially do better with the resources that we have, and I actually think Cambodia has done quite a lot of work in this area in building passive cooling techniques into its new building code, and that's to be commended. So it's a good example for others to take a look at. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say on both those questions about SDG and passive cooling.
Thank you very much.
If I may jump in, sorry. And passive cooling is something that gets me really excited. And the advantage that air conditioners have is they are, packaged well. You buy them, you fit them into your house, and you're good. The second thing is that it's aspirational for a lot of households today in countries like ours. But what we're missing here is when air conditioners become our cooling solutions for large-scale thermal comfort, they often are picked up by affluent cooling spaces. So in countries like mine, it's the airport or the upcoming metro stations, maybe. It's malls. These are not accessed by the majority of people, and even if they are, it's for a fraction of their day. What air conditioners miss is spaces like courtrooms, spaces like offices, government offices, and bus stations. And this is where passive cooling has a great potential. And I think while there is a need to include it within building standards, and I think countries are doing it, implementation is a challenge, but it's definitely worth the effort.
Thank you very much, Apurva. I maybe want to ask Mr. Pak to also reflect on this question of passive cooling, because as Mark mentioned, I know that Cambodia is very much looking into passive cooling as one of the strategies for sustainable cooling, and it's mentioned in the National Cooling Action Plan. Mr. Pak, do you want to say a few words about the perspective from Cambodia?
Jenny, can you repeat your question again?
Sure. So the question from the audience was regarding the importance of passive cooling in terms of increasing the level of energy efficiency and sustainability in the space cooling sector. So I know that Cambodia is looking into some solutions on passive cooling and interested in implementing some of the projects. It's mentioned also in the National Cooling Action Plan. So maybe you could share some of your thoughts on passive cooling and its importance.
Thank you very much. Actually, yeah, we have been done on this, and also we put in place like also the building code. Also, we have been considered as to find enforcement certification to improve the cooling system, and also promote sustainable energy practice in the manufacturing country, in manufacturing sector like food and beverage. And as considered is one of the measures. So also we need to conduct also the training program that for installation and handling of the servicing sector to maintenance, also to apply and how to not so much to release the use of energy from the cooling sector. And one other is the cooling in the public sector building to reduce the reliance and use of mechanical air conditioning, and also like produce the gateway system to support the enforce the compliance and accreditation product, and also the inclusion of the performance requirement of passive cooling system in the building energy code also. And sometimes we have to promote and encourage the user for energy efficiency room ASC based on the highest tier defined in the energy label. I think that some is it can be related to also the market intervention also, like labeling and also another market enabler supporting in the instrument also. But we also dealing with the mobile air conditioner also, but as the Cambodia is the import country, so that the car is import from the regional and also maybe from Europe, also from US. That also regarding the food cold chain is the standard labeling and key commercial refrigerant apply, and should be also consider for the policy and regulation intervention also in this regard. And reduce the energy consumption and greenhouse gas emission in the cold storage would also promote energy efficiency technology and providing building design of storage facility, that etc. that we also consider in the NCAP development. That I think my point of view on this regard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pak. Any other thoughts or observations regarding passive cooling across different sustainable development goals? Otherwise, we can move to the final stage of the panel, given the time. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you all for your contributions, and maybe as a very final question from my side for this panel, I just want to ask you to give one sentence in terms of what you think is the most important or the key message from our discussion for policymakers to take on board when it comes to accelerating the effort on sustainable cooling. Just want to ask you to stick to one sentence to formulate the most important thing you want to highlight for our audience. Please, Mark, do you want to go first?
Oh, it's difficult to sum up everything in one single sentence, but I think it's a collaborative and coordinated approach between policies and sectors to help unlock finance.
Excellent. Thank you. Apurupa, would you like?
Now I don't have any pressure. Yeah.
Apurupa, would you like to go next?
Yeah, this is perhaps the toughest part of the panel, but I will say that I think we need a lot of data, gender disaggregated data, and that's how we make great policies. So,
right. Thank you very much. Patrick?
Just to highlight as well the opportunity through sustainable public procurements as an incentive that governments and industry can work together in really driving the markets. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Chara?
I'd like to ask the support from many stakeholders to encourage the SME and startup in their countries to promote highly efficiency innovations to the market. It will be very hard, but we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Dr. Supachai, could you give us your sentence? Oh, we can't hear you, unfortunately. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, for me, I think the consistency is very important for consistency of regional roadmap and national roadmap for our ASEAN member state. Maybe according to the development of air conditioner in our region country, and in one point I would like to maybe now we know for the promoting about the small scale for air conditioner, but in the future I would like to invite every country expand the scale of air conditioner to promote in high efficiency in our AMS. Thank you.
Excellent. Consistency and scale, indeed very important. And Mr. Pak?
Thank you very much. I think for mine is we need to promote the energy efficiency equipment combined with the well-trained technician to avoid energy high energy consumption in the air conditioner.
Thank you so much. I think all your points are making a very good conclusion to our panel. We got the whole spectrum of important elements of the policy package and implementation actions for sustainable cooling in ASEAN region. I hope for our audience it was very informative and we touched upon a wide range of topics. Today we have a lot of work ahead of us all together with member states of ASEAN region. I would like to thank you all for your contributions and sharing your expertise and insights. It was a real pleasure to have the discussion with you today. So with that, I would like to close this panel and give you virtual applause for all your participation. And I will give the floor to my colleague, Emily McWalter from IEA to give closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ksenia, and thank you everyone for an excellent discussion today. I think we've heard a lot of really good points and suggestions for actions from our speakers and panelists this afternoon. Some of the key messages I picked up today, there a lot of action has been done already, but we should aim for more ambitious targets, policies and programs to help put the world on track to the net zero emissions by mid-century. So I'm a big believer in energy efficiency, and to quote the IEA's Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol, we consider energy efficiency to be the first fuel as it still represents the cleanest and, in most cases, the cheapest way to meet our energy needs. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. In terms of our roadmaps, we are planning to submit the final drafts to our ASEAN stakeholders later this month for approval, and we will publish them next year. We thank everyone for their support in the developments thus far, particularly the ASEAN-Australian Development Cooperation Programme Phase 2, the ESC, SSN, ASEAN Secretariat, and ACE, and all our ASEAN member state focal points, and all of you have read drafts, provided case studies and feedback. We really appreciate it. We really hope that these roadmaps will be useful to you. And we hope to work with you next year to take these key recommendations forward. I'd like to thank you all for attending totoday's session. I'd like to thank our speakers, particularly Dr. Prasert, Ms. Caroline Scott, Dr. Nuki and Dr. Brian Motherway, and all of the panelists for a really excellent discussion. And I hope to see you all here tomorrow for an equally interesting workshop on buildings and the construction. So thank you everyone, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.